for the gifts that we have to give, and for this community which truly seeks to live out its covenant, that love is the spirit of this church and service is its law. May we be grateful. So this isn't exactly the sermon that I thought that I was going to be giving today. This is the first Sunday of the new church year, and I've had a pretty good idea of what I wanted to talk about for a couple of months now. And even more so, I had a pretty good idea of the tone that I wanted to convey for the service. This is the water communion ceremony. This is our homecoming service. This is the start of a new church year. So this is a time to celebrate community and feel good and look with hope and optimism to the coming year. But then Charlottesville happened and this weekend happened. And we need to talk about that because I recognize that in light of that, many of you may not be feeling lighthearted and hopeful and optimistic this morning. You may be struggling with that a little bit. I know that I am struggling with that a little bit because I never imagined that I would be seeing some of the things that I saw this weekend in my country in 2017. Friday night, as I was getting to bed, actually, around midnight, I made the mistake of looking at CNN on my phone like one last time, right? Like the worst possible thing that you could do. And just about dropped my phone on the floor because I emblazoned across the website were images of hundreds of men, primarily young men, marching with torches on the University of Virginia campus. And they were Nazis. They were literal Nazis, not metaphorical Nazis. They were giving Nazi salutes, and they were chanting Nazi slogans, which were too vile to repeat in this space. They had ostensibly come to rally around a statue of General Robert E. Lee, the Confederate general, because the statue has been slated to be removed, and they were protesting this. And this nighttime rally was the opening salvo of a day-long hate gathering that had been scheduled for the following day, so Saturday, in Charlottesville called Unite the Right, which ultimately brought thousands of heavily armed right-wing nationalists into the city of Charlottesville. Now, as it happens, across the square on Friday night, where these young men with torches had assembled chanting their Nazi slogans, there was a small church just over the way. And at that exact same time, it was hosting an interfaith gathering of clergy, of community activists, of just concerned people who would come together to sing, to pray, to comfort each other, to draw strength, and to map out together how they were going to respond as a community to this event on Saturday that was coming to their town, this outpouring of hate. They didn't know about the event on Friday, so they were surprised to find themselves surrounded by these men. The Reverend Tracy Blackman, Dr. Tracy Blackman, who's the Executive Minister of Justice for the UCC, the first African-American woman to ever hold that post, actually tweeted, like, "We're surrounded by KKK!" exclamation point. She did not expect to find herself in that position. And the police who were on the scene, the very few police on the scene, told the people in the church to stay inside because they could not otherwise guarantee that they would not be harmed. So you can imagine how terrifying that must have been. And that was exactly the intent of this gathering of young men with torches, to intimidate, to terrify. This is the face of white domestic terrorism, and they are organizing. And this is the thing that stood out most for me about the picture that I was seeing and the video that I saw. In the past, of course, these things happened. These people would have been marching with hoods, right, or ski masks, or bandanas. But on Friday, there were no masks, there were no hoods. They felt no need whatsoever to hide their faces. They have been emboldened. They are not afraid. So you probably saw the media footage of the rally that followed the next day, yesterday. The Nazi banners, the KKK signs, the racist and anti-Semitic slogans encouraging violence, heavily armed people with helmets and clubs and guns, and you saw the chaos and violence that ensued. The day ended in tragedy when a person with a car drove into a crowd of counter-protesters killing one person and injuring dozens. And then in a separate tragedy, 2 state troopers lost their lives in a helicopter crash. They were in the air monitoring the violence when they crashed. So this morning, our hearts go out to the people of Charlottesville. We mourn for the lives lost and the people injured. We mourn for the fabric of community that has been torn. We stand in solidarity with the intended targets of white nationalist terrorism. And we pray, may the community be safe today, and may people be given time to heal, and may voices of love rise over the voices of hate and division. And if you saw the violent images and you heard the racist and the anti-Semitic slogans, I hope you also saw the images of peaceful resistance. The counter-protesters who, with great courage, confronted armed and armored fascists and refused to be intimidated and refused to allow hate to have the final word. Clergy came in from all around the country. They joined arms and walked in silent witness across the city. And they went up to the fairgrounds where the fascists had gathered, and they kneeled in silent prayer all along the grounds. Local groups held their own rallies to hold up messages of diversity and inclusion. Our UUA president, Susan Frederick Gray, was there. Christina Rivera, board member and religious educator. Reverend Jean Pupke of First UU Richmond. Reverend Carlton Elliott Smith of the Southern region. So I'm proud that our people were there answering the call of love. And it is on all of us, individually and collectively, to reject in the strongest possible terms these ideologies of hate and to insist that our leaders do the same. It is on us to hold them accountable. But denouncing and rejecting Nazis and white power fascists is the easy part. Nazism is ultimately the poisonous fruit of the soil of white supremacy. And dealing with white supremacy is a much bigger challenge for us as a culture and a society. And by white supremacy, I mean an ideology that assumes explicitly or implicitly that whiteness is by default the norm. Whiteness is the standard by which other things are judged. That whiteness is the desirable state, and that institutions should be designed first and foremost to meet the needs of white people. It is the assumptions of white supremacy that allow groups like those assembled at Charlottesville to craft an elaborate mythology of white victimhood, that says white people today are the real victims of racism. And white people today are being shut out of the benefits of modern society, and white people are being disenfranchised, and it is white people who are in danger and must live in fear. And none of these claims are supported by facts or reality, but there's a saying that goes, when you have been on top for so long, equality can feel like oppression. Once upon a time, and it was not very long ago, white supremacy was the official ideology of this country. Political and social and legal institutions were consciously designed to serve white people and to exclude or marginalize people of color. Today, white supremacy can maintain itself through inertia and collective amnesia. We have largely segregated neighborhoods and segregated schools. People of color as a group have vastly less accumulated wealth. For black people, the median wealth, is 9% of that for white families. They have higher unemployment, fewer opportunities, poorer health, worse schools and municipal services, much greater exposure to environmental toxins, vastly higher incarceration rates, and none of this is an accident. We did not get here by accident. This is policy. This was policy. But having gotten where we are, you no longer need explicitly racist ideology to maintain all of this. The situation can stay just the same by inertia, just by the weight of accumulated inequality and institutional memory and cultural habits, and by people who are just pursuing their own interests. But those interests have been shaped in a context of 400 years of white supremacy. So you don't need Nazis. As the poet Guante wrote, and I give thanks to Susan Cassada for calling me back to this, he said, "How many skinheads do you think are in the room when they set immigration policy or when they decide curriculum for public schools?" Of course, we have to oppose white nationalism in the strongest possible terms when it rears its head. But skinheads and Nazis, the poet says, are like the shark. White supremacy is not the shark. White supremacy is the ocean that we are all swimming in. Sharks kill 12 people a year maybe, but thousands of people drown. So Unitarian Universalism dreams of a world in which no one drowns in the waters of white supremacy. We dream of a world free of all oppressions, not just racism, but anti-Semitism and homophobia and transphobia and misogyny, all of which, of course, were on display Friday and Saturday. All the forces that divide us and raise some up at the expense of others, or threaten people with violence and harm. But the logic of white supremacy, of this institutional inertia, to return just to the subject of race, says it's not enough to just be non-racist. We can be personally non-racist all day long, and the institutions that sustain white supremacy will continue to sustain white supremacy. We have to be consciously and intentionally anti-racist. We have to be committed to dismantling the systems of white supremacy and unlearning and challenging the culture of white supremacy that supports it, the water that we're all swimming in and day out without even being aware of it. And the same goes for challenging the culture of sexism and homophobia and so on. But the point is not just to be anti-this and anti-that, anti-racist, anti-homophobic, and just define ourselves by what we are against. Unitarian Universalism upholds in its principles and in its history a strong, positive vision of a world where peace and love and equality are core values, inclusiveness, and the result is a society of human flourishing. Right? We believe in the power of the human spirit. We believe that the intellect and the imagination and the heart, if these were set free, then we would all soar to undreamt of heights. We believe that when diverse people come together in a spirit of generosity and openness, the community that we build together is ever richer and more glad through that diversity. We believe that we need one another and that it is good that we need one another. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called this vision the beloved community, a community where all people can live in freedom and peace as siblings, rejoicing in our shared humanity and celebrating our individual differences. So the vision of the beloved community and the path to achieving it is implicit in many of our principles and in the words and deeds of many UU teachers and thinkers and doers. But in the last 5 years or so, there has been a desire voiced by some to make this vision more explicit and to pull it out and highlight it as its own principle. And this is an 8th principle. And this idea has gained some momentum. So this year, the board of the Unitarian Universalist Association has appointed a commission to study the issue, which it will do in consultation with the congregations. And if the commission recommends an 8th principle, what happens is it goes to General Assembly, our annual meetings where we all vote on stuff collectively, has to pass by a 2/3 vote, goes to another General Assembly, it has to pass by another 2/3 vote, and then it would become official. So this is a multi-year process that is envisioned. And the text of the proposed 8th Amendment in its current form is in your bulletin, and it reads like this. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. It's a little wordy, but that's how we roll as Unitarian Universalists. We like our words, right? So let's take this bit by bit, okay? Let's break this up into some pieces. We covenant to affirm and promote. Right? Unitarian Universalism is a covenantal religion. What we share in common is not a set of beliefs that we have to have, not an orthodoxy, but a covenant, a commitment to be together in a certain way and to live out certain principles to the best of our ability and our understanding. Right? So this would become one of those principles, part of our covenant. We covenant to journey towards spiritual wholeness. Meaning, first of all, we recognize that we are not there yet. The society we inhabit does not look like the world that we are dreaming of. To get there, we have to go on a journey, which means that it will take time. We may get lost. We may encounter setbacks and obstacles. We will hope for good traveling companions along the way. Hopefully someone will have a compass. But if not, we'll navigate by the sun and the stars as best we can. Now, one of the conditions of the society that we are in is that people are not whole. This is another way of echoing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said that we are all bound up in a single garment of destiny, such that I cannot be free until you are free. So in a society divided by hatred and prejudice, none of us can be truly whole. We recognize the harm done to everyone, including ourselves, by the system we live in. So we covenant to journey towards wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community. And this is the dream explicitly stated. We are journeying towards the beloved community where all people are made welcome in the fullness of their selves. And a community like that is necessarily diverse and multicultural because everybody is welcome. And note also that we have to build this community. It's not just going to happen. And finally, to build this community, we will have to take actions to dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Or in other words, it is not enough to be non-racist. We have to be anti-racist and anti-oppressive. We have to intentionally dismantle these systems. And we recognize that those systems live in institutions, but they also live in our hearts. And this doesn't make us bad people, it makes us human. And as such, we recognize that we will have some personal work to do along this journey. So that is the eighth principle, and as I said, it'll be several years before it can be adopted as a principle by the Unitarian Universalist Association. But UU congregations are independent, and we don't necessarily have to wait around for things. So some congregations have begun seriously engaging with this eighth principle already. For example, our UUI board has adopted the eighth principle as a guiding principle this year to direct their work. And together, this congregation is going to have a year-long conversation about what it would mean for ourselves as individuals and for our church if we adopted this principle as a congregation at the end of this church year. So this conversation we're going to have is going to happen in many places. It's going to happen up here at the pulpit. It's going to happen in educational offerings, in committees, in big and small group discussions that will be held periodically throughout the year. You are all invited to be a part of this conversation, and there will be many opportunities to contribute. So this conversation, and ultimately the eighth principle, invites us on a journey out of the brokenness of our history and into a possible future where all people are valued and can be free. I believe our values as UUs firmly point in this direction. It will not necessarily be an easy journey, and I'm sure that there will be some surprises and some setbacks. But if we set out, we will have each other as traveling companions. I believe if we undertake this journey, we will walk with the blessing of our ancestors. And I believe that if we walk this journey, we will carry our children with us to a better place. That is the dream. And this is a prayer for traveling mercies and sure-footedness, for clear vision, for bread, for your body and spirit, for water, for your safe arrival, and for everyone you see along the way. I hope that we will consider walking this journey together. I hope we will do so with love and compassion and optimism and hope. And I hope for our safe arrival with everyone we see along the way. Blessed be, and amen. Now, our closing hymn today, this is an experiment, first Sunday of the church year. This is a call and response. That means you people over here, you have that first line, I'm on my way. And then you people over here, you have the line underneath, you echo it. I'm on my way, like that, to the freedom land, to the freedom land. Then we repeat again, and then when we get to the part where it says all, everyone sings it together. I'm on my way, great God, I'm on my way. Then you can repeat if you like. Okay, and then that's the basic pattern, and then we just do some variations to the verses. I'm going to tell you right now, if you're following along in the gray hymnal, in order to be more gender inclusive, I have changed some of the lyrics, brothers and sisters, to people and neighbors, so watch for that. And remember, there's no bad singing in church, there's just singing and not singing. So would you please rise and body your spirit for our closing hymn, number 116, I'm on my way. Our closing words today are by Nancy Wood. Hold on to what is good, even if it is a handful of earth. Hold on to what you believe, even if it is a tree which stands by itself. Hold on to what you must do, even if it is a long way from here. Hold on to my hand, even when I have gone away from you. Now we extinguish the flame of our chalice, but not the light of understanding, the warmth of compassion, or the fire of commitment. Let us take those with us until we meet again. Go in peace.